Hello. Um, I'm here to talk on one of my rants. I have been seeing so much in the news and what's going on with all the deportations and the migrants of the illegals, the the MS-13 members that may or may not be MS-13 members. There's a lot of stuff happening, and quite frankly, I have questions about what the different statuses are, who's covered, who's not covered by our laws, rules, and regulations. So I did a little research, and I put it all down on paper because I want to get it out to see. Because if I figure if I have questions, maybe there's somebody else out there that has questions and will be helped and maybe can even teach me about some of these things. So I've known that I've gotten into a number of discussions and arguments over who is covered. Like, I'm being told that no, only Americans are governed by the Constitution or laws, and if you're not governed, then therefore you don't need due process protections. So the deportations and it's even hard to call them deportations, of the Venezuelans, of this one man from Maryland that seems to be getting all the press, that they're not covered by the Constitution because they're not here legally, and that's another question all in itself. So I'm thinking, well, who exactly do our laws or the Constitution actually protect? Is it just those of us who are citizens? Is it natural citizens? Is it or natural or naturalized citizens? Is it maybe permanent residents? And I didn't even know what those distinctions were. So this is my theory. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not any kind of scholar of any kind. I'm just a guy who did some reading, research, and thought about it. And again, if you have any questions or if you want to clarify something that I said, please let me know. But start the Declaration of Independence, because we didn't have a country until we declared our independence from England, and it starts pretty much that, and I'm going to quote here: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." We've all learned that from 5th grade on. You may not have really thought about it back then, but what were they saying? And first off, I'm just going to go in and say right off the bat, I am not a proponent where it said endowed by the Creator. It sounds like they're talking about God-given rights. And I don't want to get into a whole theological debate over this one. I think it does presuppose that there is some kind of higher being out there. And as you may be able to tell from my context, I don't believe that there is. Because I got to think, well, if there is some kind of supernatural being out there, why would it care what region, country, tribe you're in? If everybody is the same, why do we have different rights than those in Mexico, Canada, England, Zimbabwe? Or why don't some of these people don't have rights? So I do not believe there is such a thing as God-given rights. I think that all rights are bestowed upon us by others that make the laws. So technically, are they even rights? Because you can take them away. If somebody does something to violate somebody else, they can be taken away. So they're, as George Carlin would say, they're not rights, they're privileges. However, we're going to assume that these rights are there. Now, I think the intention is clear that the people that created this document, that forged a new nation. I mean, I didn't appreciate this when I was younger, but think about living in a time where you're under control of the strongest government on the planet, and you say, no, we want to do it our own way, and you break for. You have to start from zero and start a whole government, like a way of ruling everybody that's there and that may come there in the future. it's mind-boggling. I mean, these people had an enormous capacity to foresight, and they got things wrong. They're not perfect, but we still determine our American values by what these founders came up with. Everybody's saying, well, what did the founders mean by that? When you look at the kind of the English may have changed a little bit, the wording may have changed. We don't use these words anymore, but what did the founders intend? That's quite that's phenomenal. But I think it is very clear that if they are talking about these God-given rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that all men are created equal. Doesn't say all citizens, doesn't say all Americans. All men are created equal. And I think they gave a lot of time and thought to the wording that they put in here. So that's a Declaration of Independence. That's not really how we dedicated. That's not how we set up our government. That was just saying to England, yep, we're busting free. That we don't agree with you. These are our values and our beliefs as a nation, or as a budding nation. This is what we want to do. And then we move into we'll skip over a little bit, but eventually we settled on the Constitution. That's been the same now for 250-ish years. And it goes over the whole breakdown. It's been changed, and the founders were smart enough to allow this document to be changed with changing times. They saw that coming. But according to the Fifth Amendment, I'm going to go over three specifically, just to further my point again. If you have anything to refute what I'm saying, let me know. But according to the Fifth Amendment, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. Doesn't say any American at this point. We had declared ourselves independent of England. We won the war for independence. We are now a country, and we are saying that not the people of the United States, but any person shall not be deprived of life, liberty. That was a big one. In the Fifth Amendment, you hear people plead the Fifth. You talk about not self-incriminating, but that's also in there. Next one, Sixth Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy I'm not so sure that's the right word, but the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. Again, doesn't say anything about your status as an American or what have you. In all criminal prosecutions. So if you are prosecuting an immigrant that came in, or somebody that's here illegally that's now under the jurisdiction of the United States, they have this right to a speedy trial and to be informed of the nature and cause of their accusation. Then we're going to go finally to the 14th Amendment. Section 1 specifically deals with U.S. citizenship, but it goes on to say, no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Again, says zero about whether you're born here, naturalized. The 13th Amendment talks about slavery. It actually mentions the word slavery and indentured servitude. So they knew the word. It was full on their mind during the Reconstruction period. But they say no person shall be denied of life. No person under the jurisdiction of the United States. If you're in the United States, you're under the jurisdiction of unless you're some kind of diplomat, you're under the jurisdiction of the United States. So as again, not a lawyer, not a scholar, my layperson interpretation of what I was reading earlier today. If you are here, regardless of your status, you are covered by our laws. And I mention this because of this one gentleman, the Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is down in El Salvador after he was told he should not be deported to El Salvador. He was not given, nor were any of these Venezuelan people that were deported and now incarcerated in an El Salvadorian prison, they had none of this. They were here, legally or illegally, irrelevant. They are people covered under the jurisdiction of the United States. If they were gang members, if they were murderers, rapists, pillagers, whatever the case is, there are rules to follow, so that way they can get their due process. They can have their they can enjoy their speedy and public trial and be informed of their what they did. They can defend themselves. They weren't granted any of that. None of them. But we're focusing on the Garcia, Abreu Garcia person, because that seems to be the one that's in the media. You've got Trump posting pictures of him with pictures on his hand that says MS-13, which was clearly photoshopped in. That symbol wasn't there. They're saying, that's just a symbol of that's just an interpretation of what the symbols on his hands mean. And clearly Trump is he has no problem with defaming people. So I don't really see how they're going to do that. But if he's posting altered pictures in order to prove his guilt, it leads me to believe they don't have any evidence of his guilt. Otherwise, they'd present that. So he was denied a trial. He was denied any kind of due process to say, yes, this is what happened. And for I understand, there are different laws for the immigration status, but as our Constitution says, they, being under the jurisdiction of the United States, are entitled to this due process. So then that led me to think about, what are these different categories of people? And I'm still a little bit confused, but this is what I learned. The immigration system in the United States is quite complex, and we had a chance to revamp it, redo it at the end of Biden's term, but Trump told his people that are apparently scared of him not to do it. There are, from what I can see, 4 different basic categories, and we'll go a little bit deeper. There are citizens, those people born or naturalized, born in the United States, naturalized, a legal process to become a citizen. Citizens can live, work, vote, hold passports, are not subject to deportations in the United States. You have residents who are sometimes called lawful permanent residents, or sometimes green card holders. That has to be renewed every 10 years or so. They are here legally. They're allowed to work in the United States. They're allowed to live in the United States. They can't vote. They are subject to deportation if they break rules, laws, if they engage in criminal activity. And that is a big reason right there why these permanent residents, the green card holders, are far less likely to cause crime than homegrown Americans. If I commit a crime, I can get thrown in jail, but I can't be deported. Well, legally, I can't be deported because I'm a U.S. citizen. Somebody else who is a green card holder has been here, applied for status, maybe working on citizenship, but hasn't gotten there yet, commits the same crime that I did, and may go to jail or may get deported back to wherever they came from. And that's for somebody who's going through that process is that'd be life altering. That would ruin everything that they work for. So yes, there are non-citizens that are committing crimes and rape and I'm not here trying to say that they're all perfect angels, but there's a lot more homegrown criminals in this country than there are foreign ones. All right, so as residents, non-immigrants. These are individuals who are in the U.S. temporarily for a specific purpose, work, travel, tourism, schooling. That's why they're here. They must adhere to the terms of their visa, and they intend to leave the United States at the end of their stay. Then you have undocumented immigrants, which would, if you believe the current regime, these are the satanic worst people in the world. They're here without legal permission. They don't really have any status. So that one is questionable. Like, they came in, what are they doing here? But then it gets broken down even farther. You have, say, immigrants versus migrants. The best I can find with that is how long they plan on staying here. An immigrant is someone that comes from another country, moves in, and intends to stay. They want to build roots, families, jobs, etc. A migrant is somebody that comes here and doesn't have an intention to stay. They'll move on somewhere else. Someone can start as a migrant and say, oh, you know what? I like it here. I want to stay. Now they become an immigrant. Doesn't really have anything to do with their legal status in the country. That's just kind of their intent. And if you think about it, unless you are descendant from a Native American, descendant from slaves that were, brought here against their will from, I guess most of them or all of them came from Africa. We are all either ourselves migrants, immigrants, or we were descended from migrants or immigrants. That's the way it is. That's those people eventually became citizens. They now are under the jurisdiction of the United States. So immigrants, they're the ones that are here. They get the green card. Those are the ones that are here permanently. Non-immigrants here for the U.S. temporary period towards students, business visitors. Got documented. Undocumented aliens are those who are not authorized to be here. So those are the undocumented immigrants, aliens. Their status here is questionable. Resident aliens are individuals who are legally residing in the U.S. with the intent to live here permanently, but are not yet citizens. Some of you may know I just went to Mexico to visit a friend of mine who moved from local. I met him up here a number of years ago. He moved to Mexico. He gave up his residence here on Long Island, moved to Mexico. So I guess you could say while I was down there, I was a non-immigrant. I was in Mexico. I'm sure they have their own definitions, but if we're going to use these definitions just to make it a little bit clearer, I was a non-immigrant. I went down there for the point of tourism. My goal was just to visit him. According to the paperwork I got, I was allowed to stay in Mexico for up to 180 days per year. So I would have overstayed. I could have been overstaying my welcome and then gotten deported out. My friend, who now lives down there, is a resident alien. He doesn't really intend to get Mexican citizenship, but he doesn't have a home here in the United States anymore. His permanent residence is in Mexico, and he had to go through all sorts of legal filings to do that. Then you have non-resident aliens. So those are people that are legally here. So no, my apologies. He's not a resident. He's a non-resident alien because he doesn't have an intention of becoming a citizen. You have enemy aliens. If the United States and Mexico went to war, these are individuals individuals or citizens of another country that we are at war with. So those are enemy aliens. So if the United States and Mexico went to war, my friend who is what did we say he was a non-resident alien would become an enemy alien. Even though he's not part of any kind of rebellion, he is a citizen of the United States with residence in Mexico. And then you have the difference. You have asylees and refugees, and I am not 100% sure of the difference. An asylee is an individual who has been granted protection from being returned to their home country due to a well-founded fear of persecution, like Kilmar Rego Garcia. He was targeted by gangs down there, fled to the United States, claimed asylum, and now he's here on temporary protected status, which is, not a pathway to citizenship. It's a temporary but renewable method to legally be in the United States and to work while here. Refugees are individuals who have been granted protection from persecution in their home country and are allowed to enter the United States. I'm not 100% sure of the difference of those regardless. Whether you are an asylee, a refugee, whether you are an immigrant, a migrant, a resident alien, or if you are an undocumented alien, you are still afforded the protection of the Constitution of the United States. You are considered all persons. That is the way I take it. I'd be happy to hear if you think otherwise, or if you think the same. I'd like to hear that too. I did all this to kind of clear it up in my own head, because there's just so much. I even hesitate to call it misinformation, disinformation, because they're just flat out lies. There's a whole lot of lying coming out, and it's terrible and just awful to see. So, my 2 cents. We're getting a little bit long in this video, so I'll cut it off here. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Where was I wrong? I'll talk to you guys soon.